All right. Good
Good
morning.
morning.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I am well. I want to start out by saying thanks for joining me this morning here on The Juice. We've been doing this program weekly since the COVID shutdown. And most of the time, all of the time actually, we've been talking to entrepreneurs and different businesses within different industry sectors about how the COVID shutdown has affected business and changed ideas about how businesses will respond at this time. We had a panel scheduled for this week, which was along those lines. But given the events of last week with George Floyd, with the protests, and with such unrest and sadness in the country, we just felt like at Start Garden this week was not appropriate to continue with our normal programming, that we had to address the issues at hand, that we feel really strongly that we need to discuss it. We have to have open dialogue. And so that's why this morning Nadia is here with me to talk about that. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion that is not always easy. I don't think it's ever easy to have. And I haven't had a whole lot of discussions like this that are really frank and raw. And so I'm anxious to start that. So I want to introduce, I'm Laurie Supinski, I'm Program Director at Start Garden. And we do a lot of work at Start Garden, talking about creating equity in the business world, in our ecosystem, and working a lot with minority entrepreneurs. And so I always feel like, the work we do and my view on all of this is very open and open-minded. But when we get into this, I'll share something that happened to me last week that made me realize that I can do better, and I need to do better. So, but first, let me talk to Nadia. Let me introduce Nadia. I know Nadia as an entrepreneur because most of our conversations have been about she and her husband Shaitan, who are going to be opening GR Noir. And so the other part of Nadia that some people may or may not know is that she has a long career with not only the Kellogg Foundation, but currently with her own consulting firm. And a lot of the work that Nadia has done has been with regard to leadership development, and especially as it relates to equity. So maybe Nadia, you could kind of talk to that a little bit.
So thank you for inviting me to this conversation. We're definitely living in some interesting moments, and the overwhelm can really take you there. So I just appreciate Start Garden. I appreciate you, Laurie, for your transparency and vulnerability, which is necessary in moments like this to take this conversation on. So yeah, the other part of my life, most of my career, I've spent trying to advance racially equitable strategies and moving people from awareness and knowledge to agency and action so that we can transform systems and programs and policies, and ultimately really trying to create the kinds of supports and structures that allow for people to show up as fully human. I spent the last 14 years of my career at the Kellogg Foundation as a program officer, advancing racial equity strategies with grassroots organizations that were teaching dealing with racial trauma and racial healing, that were advancing policy and mobilizing and organizing. There are some really, really powerful organizing groups and activists across the country that I've had the opportunity to work with, including Black Lives Matter. There were also organizations that were advancing policy, more traditional civil rights and emerging civil rights organizations like National Urban League and NAACP and UNIDOS US, National Congress of American Indians. I was program officer for an initiative that we called Anchor Institutions. And this was 9, at different points, it was like 9 to 11 civil rights organizations, and helping to support their efforts to work collectively, not only to go deep in their different constituencies, but also to work collectively across communities of color to advance these issues. So this work has always happened in our country. And it's my life calling to do this work. This is why I was created. And there is an interesting connection between the work that we're doing with GR Noir and the work that we're advancing with Brigham Consulting. And it's more subtle, I think, but it's similar to the work that Stark Garden is aiming for, is trying to help be intentional about a strand of its work being focused on entrepreneurs of color.
Right.
So that's the work I do.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
So I am going to open it up with a little bit of a story, because I think it's an example of what may or may not be happening, and what people may be feeling all over the country, especially white people. Last week when everything exploded with George Floyd, and in addition, the incident with the woman in Central Park. It was horrifying. It's horrifying to watch. It's sad. It's terrible. I happened to be having an email exchange about work with a female, minority female, and I'm not, a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, and she just expressed how sad and hurt she was over everything that was happening. And I responded back because I felt the same. But my response back was, I thought, to be sort of empathetic. And it was that I too felt bad and I felt pain. But it also was it was more about how I felt almost ashamed as a white person to see a couple of those, those incidents and how they reflected on being white. And what white people had done to Black people, and it's been happening forever, and we know it, and we acknowledge it, and we feel bad about it. But what have we done about it? And when I sent my response, afterwards, it nagged at me. Something I felt like, you know what? Why did I say that? Like, what? I made that about me. I made that about how I felt about being white, and I felt like I had to comment, and almost comment in that, I don't do that. I don't feel that way. I wouldn't behave like that. And so I wanted to distance myself from, something I thought like didn't reflect on me. I didn't want it to reflect on me. And so I realized after that I had really turned that around and made that about me. And that wasn't thoughtful. It wasn't showing empathy. It was being selfish almost. And so I reached back out and I apologized. But throughout the rest of the week, as things progressively got worse, and there were demonstrations and riots, and the emotion in the country and in the world was just exploding, I had a really hard time knowing how to appropriately respond, because I felt like my first knee-jerk reaction was to make it about me. And I was, I was shocked at my own self. And then I didn't know what was appropriate anymore. I didn't know what to say, and I didn't know how to react. And so I think what I just think is that if we could kind of talk about why is it and how is it that this is happening right at this moment with, is it, because I don't think it's just happening to me. I think we've gotten to a boiling point in this country where this is just raw, and it's people can't tolerate it anymore. And why is it happening right now? Like, why is this moment in time when we're seeing this reaction?
Yeah, so first let me just say that I think it's, in this moment, I've said to a lot of my white allies, and I've said to my own folk, um, it's very difficult to it's very difficult to watch the conversations. This is my life's work, and so I do this work every day, regardless of if there's a George Floyd or not. I do this work because I'm trying to prevent a George Floyd, right?
Right.
But in this moment when this happens, often the questions are about how do we support white people as they're dealing and feeling whatever it is that they're dealing and feeling. And that's a real difficulty. At the same time, Laurie, to you in particular, because of the work we've gotten to know each other. I would say that the reflective moments that you have to kind of think about this, and I would say this to any white person, don't run away from it. Sit in that discomfort and figure out, what is that about? And I would say that most people don't do that. They're not willing. It's uncomfortable, so they walk away. They put it down. They rationalize it away just to make themselves feel better. And I think that that is actually counterproductive to ridding oneself and our society from this sickness. And I would say, in terms of like, why do I feel like this is happening now? On the one hand, I feel like it has always happened. Our people who look like me have always been treated this way. I think what makes it feel a bit overwhelming for us, or why we have another flashpoint in this moment, and what makes it feel overwhelming is because we are dealing with the pandemic of COVID and all that that means, COVID-19, and all that that means in terms of not being able to be with human beings are made to be with one another. So not being able to be with your loved ones, not being able to grieve the loss and the loss of life, and having those cultural marks, those rites of passage, are important things to human beings, particularly for people of color. Being disproportionately impacted on the jobs front and with the sickness, I think is problematic and overwhelming. And I think what did it for me was when I saw the protest of Ahmaud Arbery, and the protesters were out with masks on. My reaction was, man, we are fighting for our lives as we fight for our lives.
Right.
And I think I think what we have is a clashing of two pandemics: the pandemic of racism and the pandemic of coronavirus or COVID-19. And I think that the overwhelm of all of that is, I think, what makes it much more difficult. And I think because we're going through COVID-19, and that even in this moment, that someone could go far out of their way over an alleged $20 bill that's a huge expression of how devalued a Black body is. Right. And that's, I think, even if it was fake, even if he was trying to pass it, it's $20. So our lives are worth less than $20.
Right.
And that is incredible, I think, to take in.
It is. I think absolutely. I mean, and I think, everyone is feeling, it's so raw right now for everyone. The world is upside down. People are losing loved ones. They're losing their businesses. They're losing their jobs. You can't be with your family, like you said. You can't be with loved ones. People are missing life moments. And I just think everyone is about this close to losing it. Yeah. And, I just think, I think that is probably causing people to act, maybe people who wouldn't have acted before. And so I just, it's hard for me to express. I think that you take that emotion and then it is a reaction. And we're seeing a lot of good come out of it because we are finally seeing some movement, but in the same token, there's things that come out of it that aren't helping the cause, but it's just showing how raw people really are. I mean, clearly, yeah, go.
I was just going to say, like, there's been a lot of conversation around peaceful protest and the right to protest, and I don't condemn I certainly don't condemn the protesters. Protest and protest is what we need. This is the arm, and organizing is the arm of accountability for our country and for the world, right? When people rise up and they speak back and say, no, this is not enough, this is where accountability truly comes from, organically. I don't condemn the rioters. I don't condone it, but I don't condemn them, right? Mm-hmm. I understand. As everyone seems to be bastardizing different quotes from Dr. King, one of the things that he, and when I say that, I mean using his words for their own agendas to squelch protest. What he said was that a riot is the voice, is the speech of the unheard. It's the voice of the unheard. And I think that people don't feel heard. Now, what I do condemn are those efforts that are undermining this moment that is about Black lives,
right?
And that are that show up in the form of white folks who are really about something else,
right?
And that show up in the form locally of managerial racism, right. And that's this notion of like, let's manage the Black folks so that we can, right, and the brown folk and those who are out there, white allies who are trying to do this work. I have a real problem with those efforts because it doesn't lead to the kind of transformation that we need to see.
Right. Oh no, I mean, it's totally exploiting on purpose and very, in some cases, very organized and planned. It's a planned erosion of a peaceful message, and a very necessary message, and it's taking advantage of that and it's exploiting it, and it's scary. It's scary and it's destructive.
It's always interesting to me how, people of color, particularly Black folks, after such oppression that leads to death and violent death, that the expectation is one that we should not have a feeling about it, which further suggests how one thinks about the Black body. That we shouldn't have an emotion attached to it, and that whatever emotion or action that is attached to it, it ought to be peaceful.
Yeah.
Right. And that's lunacy.
Yeah.
That doesn't even make good sense. Again, I'm not condoning violence.
Right.
I'm condoning I'm condemning the expectation that we ought not have a visceral, loud, uncontrolled reaction to someone taking our life. I'm responding to that expectation because that is actually at the heart. Like you asked, what's the connection between, the police brutality and COVID-19? There is a connection, and the connection is that, with COVID, we were able to illuminate all across all systems, all the ways in which Black people, brown people are disenfranchised from our society, that they are essential in some sense, but also disproportionately impacted. Right. And it's sort of this slow death, all the ways that we slowly die, right? Yeah. Yeah. Police brutality is about this quick sort of like, and nobody notices it. Right. Day to day. This is like mundane. There's a theorist, a book about racial formation in the United States. So my PhD research is all about race relations and power inequalities.
Mhm.
But Omi and Winant talks about racism as this mundane, everyday occurrence. We think of it as abhorrent, as something that, like, oh my gosh, they killed a Black person. But this happens and when I say every day, I mean every single day. The
Mhm.
news just doesn't show it all the time.
Yeah,
But the
right.
families, we know it in our community. We know how it shows up. Not just police brutality, but disenfranchisement from economic opportunities,
Right.
lack of access to quality education, no access to health care. Like, it happens slowly. We slowly die
Yeah,
every single day. And then we have these flashes.
right. Well, and, I mean, I think that, through the work that we're doing at Stark Garden, it's so obvious even during the pandemic, with regard to some of the recovery funds and things like that, that it's just so disproportionate where the money goes to and who has access to it, or you know, just what relationships are out there that white people have that people of color don't have, that allow them to get things that other people don't. And you don't we don't talk about that all the time, but then when something like this happens, it's just so obvious. You start to see it. And not everybody sees it,
Yeah.
because not everybody does this kind of work. And so when I don't want to say you don't know what you don't know, because it's your responsibility to learn more. It is my responsibility to learn more. But I think it's easy to justify that, oh, I didn't know that was happening, or that was happening over here, so it didn't really affect me, but it does, and it has to.
And I think that there are some of my writing, I'm playing around with this notion of logics of dehumanization. If anyone who doesn't know it, there are a lot of choices that are made to not know,
Mhm,
right? So, like, where you choose to live,
mhm.
who you choose as neighbors, where you choose to send your children. There's a whole set of choices that eliminate the need to know.
No,
So when
exactly.
I, so when I hear people say they don't know, it's because you've chosen not to know.
Right. You put blinders on, you're not seeing, and
You've
you're
made a set of choices to ensure that you are blocked. So when I was at the Kellogg Foundation, they were trying to figure out whether or not Grand Rapids would be a priority place for them. And I
Mhm,
remember I was structuring that board trip, and I remember saying to the bus driver, I'm going to give you a route to
mhm,
take, because
mhm.
you're not going to take the route that allows you not to see the community. You're
Right,
going to take the route that allows that you're not going to take the route that allows us to see Grand Rapids is the safest place to live. Grand Rapids
right,
is the best place to raise a family. We're not going to take that route. We're going to
right,
take the route that showcases that Grand Rapids makes choices about how and where opportunities will be.
right,
Grand Rapids makes choices about its investments. That's what I want you to see. So, and I think that that's the point. Like, we make choices to drive particular routes just so we don't have to see those people,
mhm, right.
and all of those lead to a death,
Yeah,
like Jordan, right? All
yeah,
of because we put blinders on. So then we vote in those directions. We set up and structure our lives in those directions that lead to the death of Black people,
right,
that whether slowly or quickly.
right. Yeah. Um, as we continue this conversation, I just want to say to people that are watching that, if there's questions, or things that you want us to talk about, please share those, and we can address that. But I think Nadia and I have can keep the dialogue going, but we do want to make sure that we're being inclusive of people, and of anything that anybody else wants to say. Um, so as we move forward, I've got some things written down here, but um, so when you talk about Grand Rapids as a community, when we talk about that and what we choose to see and what we choose not to see, what are your thoughts on, the day after the most intense rioting, the first night of rioting, when so many of the businesses up and down Monroe and in different places, right downtown, were damaged, and this outpouring of people came to clean up. If I don't live in Grand Rapids, and so I was watching everything on social media, and I was watching things on TV, and a lot of the people that were down there cleaning up were white people, and there were mixed reactions to that. The reactions were some good, that look at how many people were coming out to support the local businesses, but the other reaction was, look at all the white people coming out to clean up the mess and to shove it under the carpet and make everything pretty again, because our city is pretty and we don't want this to be, and I think that most of the people that came out to clean up were really thinking that they were helping, but I wonder what they were thinking and how that call to action happened. Was it to? It was. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Again, I don't condone anything that happened to the businesses downtown. Our business is going to be downtown. The building that we're going to be in, it was vandalized.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be lying if I said I didn't feel like, oh, come on,
Yeah.
But I didn't put that. I think, and when things are, torn apart, like, of course, you think the community should come together and fix that. And I think what we have to do is step back and look at motive and the logics of it all, right?
Mm-hmm.
On both sides, right? Some of those folks, I'm not sure they were fighting for. I really don't. I don't know that to be true. Grand Rapids doesn't have a history of organizing in the same way that other communities do. So I didn't recognize that element. But on Saturday morning, when everybody got up, what I immediately thought about was the governance model of oppression in Grand Rapids.
Mm-hmm.
And it is Midwest nice. It's beyond, it's West Michigan nice, which is very different. I'm from the Midwest.
Yeah.
Not from Grand Rapids. I'm from the Midwest. So I know Midwest nice.
Yeah.
Grand Rapids is a special brand of West Michigan nice that is not kind at all. It's just nice. But there is a difference.
Right.
And so when I saw the efforts, it was sort of like a re-upping of a narrative. I even saw many people say, here, now this is who Grand Rapids is, right?
Right.
It is, and what I wonder are, where are those people in the conversation and dialogue and the need to save Black lives? Right? Like, why can't those same people speak up and out?
Mm-hmm.
Like it, about the lives of Black people. Like, who cares for Black people, and what does caring look like?
Right.
And I think that that is on the surface, absolutely, this is great. But when you step back and look at that, it's a squelching of the voice of those who are protesting, and it's a rewriting the narrative. And it's also developing this hierarchy that says these buildings are more important than the people who died, which again re-ups on the narrative that we are devalued as a people.
So then how do we take this time, and how do we create room for dialogue, and how do we take right now, what's happening right now, and don't let it go, and don't just clean it up and put new windows in buildings and make everything look pretty again, how do we hold on to how this feeling and move it forward in the form of dialogue and true collaboration for change?
So I would say that Black folk have been talking. We've
Mhm.
been dialoguing. All the times you have a person say, so we didn't have another candidate of color, so we can't have access to these resources, these loans, this PPP. Are we, can we have these extra resources for our children? Like, we talk constantly. You can't be Black and walk around. Well, there are a couple of those too. You can't be Black and put your head in the sand and walk around and act like nothing's happening. But for the most part, you can't actually walk around and act like you don't see and not be able to say in some form that there's a problem and that we need to fix it, right? Like, so I think that before rioting happens, I mean, again, Dr. King said it's the voice of the unheard.
Mhm.
They've been talking,
Right.
but it's that it feels like white folks don't listen until stuff is on fire or their property is damaged in some way. But when you have like this effort where it's sort of like, let's squelch that, let's get back to normal,
Mhm.
then you're not ready to talk because you've still not heard. Right.
Right.
And so I think that white folks need to create space to have a conversation, like a real conversation with themselves about how they want to be in the world, how they want to show up in humanity.
Mhm.
And then they need to figure out, like, okay, what, not just the conversation, but what set of actions do we need to take? Because I would argue the efforts that the extent to which rules, policies, structures, programs, strategies are implemented to squelch, contain, manage people of color,
Mhm.
that's a lot of effort, right? And all of that effort, also the effort to dehumanize us, also dehumanizes white folks. So the elders would often say, you can stand here and put your foot on my neck, no disrespect to George Floyd.
Right.
Um, but you just showed me how subhuman you are by doing that. You got to stay here with me.
Right.
I'm going to die, but you've lost yourself as well. And I think that for me, this work around racial equity is really about everybody tapping into their humanity. And first and foremost priority for me is making sure that there are healing spaces for people who look like me so that they can be, so that they can breathe, so that they can be affirmed, so that they can celebrate their, it's not just words like you're valuable, or you matter. It's like, no, you matter because you are brilliant, you are excellent, you have given the world so many major contributions that have totally changed the course of humanity. And that's what I, try to celebrate. But I feel like in this moment, uh, I I think Black folks are tired of talking. We want action. We
Yeah.
want concrete policies that really end put an end to racialized outcomes.
Yeah.
So I think that I think that's the work of white people. They need to figure out how to talk and get this.
Right.
What is it that they want to be?
Um, and there's a whole element then too of trust. Um, and so yeah, white people have to talk amongst themselves and be willing to take blame, and to realize that uh, you know dialogue has been happening that we've been part of and maybe not listened to. Um, but how do we build trust amongst ourselves that we can be open and honest? And how do communities of color and the white community come together so that there is that trust to have these conversations with owning what we have to own and taking blame, but also um, asking for help and for, for forgiveness as we move forward. I feel like the trust thing is pretty critical.
So in any relationship, when you're trying to, my husband and I have been friends since we were 9 years old. And in any relationship, it takes time for you to build trust.
Mhm.
It takes a tremendous amount of time to build trust once trust has been broken.
Mhm.
And if you continue to break trust, it gets that much more difficult. And so, but you can't build trust without honesty. So it's
Mhm.
more than Black people blaming white folks. I think
Mhm.
white folks have to own
Right.
their own thoughts about how they see people of color, their own views about how they see Black and brown people, and what they do, how they act because of those views.
Mhm.
Right. And I think that so I was when as we've been dialoguing, one of the things I was thinking about are I didn't watch the video of George Floyd because I can't anymore.
Mhm.
It's too painful. But I heard just a snippet of what he said, and I mean it's pertinent to this point about trust. Like he said, everybody keeps showing the "I can't breathe" t-shirts, and I get the connection between Eric Garner, but he said, "I can't breathe, sir,"
Mhm.
because even in his last moments, he mustered up one respect and like enough trust that perhaps if I show him this respect, he will stop.
Mhm.
Right. And I I don't think that the issue is with Black folks trusting. We've been here since 1619, and some say before. And we have believed and trusted in the values of our country,
Mhm.
that we have these unalienable rights, that we were all created equal, that we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have believed that we have the right to own and to vote, and we have believed that from the beginning. We have actually helped other people believe it.
Mhm.
We have shown up, fought every single war, tried to, hold the country accountable. Like, this is what you say in your Constitution. This is who you say we are. And we have held that up for the country. Like, don't forget who you say you are. Our issue is not trust. I think it's flipped. White folk don't trust us, which is why they're afraid, and they kill, and they shoot and think about it later, and they deny us, and they're suspicious of us, and like we've not. I feel like, and the onus should not be on us to create a platform like Black folk. Okay, we know we killed you and stuff, and we know we enslaved you and we took all your rights and we made you feed our children and like all of these things,
Right.
but you need to show yourself trustworthy.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. That
that's painful.
Yeah, that's not what I mean, I understand where you're coming from. That's not what I was.
No, I don't. I'm not suggesting you're saying that, but
No,
I'm
no, no.
saying that
But
that
you're
dialogue
right.
happens.
Right, but you are right. I mean, that is, that's it. I mean, um, you know, I've seen in the last couple days, especially on Blackout Tuesday, so many different individual people, but then organizations and companies, putting the black square on their social media and then talking about their organizations and their companies. And I'm really, it'll be really interesting to see how that after this week or whatever, where does that go? Like, what kind of conversations are going to have to happen internally for there to be any kind of change? And it's got to start from the beginning. I mean, from the top of the organization, but it's got to include everybody all the way down and inside. And I hope that we start to see examples of what change is going to start to happen. And the change isn't going to happen until the conversations happen.
Absolutely. I think that
apologies. Oh my word.
I can't talk.
What I was suggesting is I've had so many calls recently just with folks who are wanting to figure out, like, companies and organizations, like, help me figure this out. And what I've determined is, and I determined this before I started this work, like, I do this work for real. I don't want to be part of your statement or the politically correct thing that you need to do, because this is not just inside out of your organization. It's not just from top to bottom of your organization. It is actually inside out work from who you are, each individual. And when I work with different organizations and companies, and they realize that that's what we're up to, this isn't a training, like, you can't train your way out of this.
Right.
You actually have to be your way out of this.
Right.
Right. This is called for new ways of being. This is not like if I just, go to my yearly trainings and I have, I change up my statement to be inclusive. It is actually like you have to transform who you are as an individual showing up to an organization, and then how your organization operates. And it's, racial equity work is mission agnostic. So you could be changing tires, caring for children, in banking, making furniture. It doesn't matter. Wherever people are, you need to grapple with these issues and make transformation.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I even, listening to communities talk about they're going to have, training in their police forces and different ways to approach things. I look at that and I think, how do you train somebody not to be inhuman? Like, you're.
I think that you can help people think about different ideas conceptually, but we really have to examine the role of policing,
Right.
and how policing has always happened. It's a derivative of enslavement. And the patty rollers, as they were called, they had a particular mission. And I dare say they are continuing to carry out their mission. For me, like, I'm seeing all this talk on social media about there are a few bad apples. But if the other apples can't speak up,
Right.
and denounce their comrades and deal with their comrades, and there are not these structures of protection that are immediately erected to hold them, to not hold them accountable, then, like, miss me on that.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't change the conversation about, like, how does policing happen? Why do we need to be? There are communities across the country who are talking about policing in different ways. So, like, how do you have the community self-police, for instance, right? And, like, or and how, one step is community or police officers living in the community,
Right.
but we have to have a conversation about policing and the need for policing.
Yeah.
Even that's not equitable, because I ride through some neighborhoods and I never see a police officer.
Right.
Ever.
Right. Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. So I guess going back to the thought of taking right now, um, I mean, if we're gonna see real change, um, it's obviously got to happen with individuals, but you know, how do we? I guess we don't know. I mean, we're gonna have to kind of wait and see in this moment um, how people move forward after this. And hopefully people's eyes are wide open and people's hearts and minds are open and there's a lot of questioning going on internally with people. Um, but I mean, go ahead. What were you
No,
going
no,
to
no,
say?
go ahead.
Okay. Um, so I guess what I hope to kind of see from this um, is change. I know that sounds redundant, but it's kind of at this point where I don't know what do you see as being the most effective way to move forward? And I other than people having internal dialogues and really opening up the uncomfortable conversations.
I am a hopeful person by nature. In fact, my name means hope. And I've been really struggling, trying to hold on, trying to grapple with like where are we going to go from here?
Right.
And I think what is frustrating for me is that, and I think, before the woman in the park with her dog,
Mm,
before Ahmaud Arbery, before Breonna Taylor, before George Floyd, just when we were, dealing with coronavirus,
right.
what I was learning is the extent to which people, um, the, the the extent to which people are willing to uh, are not willing to deny themselves for the sake of the other. So like
Oh,
people not, really willing to like wear a mask just to keep somebody else safe.
right.
Right. Like that rugged individualism is a core value in the United States
Right.
that keeps us from caring for one another.
Right.
Um,
Or
I,
even for example, like people hoarding things from the store, toilet paper. You know, that's not just that's not about toilet paper.
mm-mm,
That's that's about I'm going to take care of me first
yeah.
and make sure that my needs are met and I don't care about anybody else that needs anything on the shelves in this store.
What, yes. And what was happening all at the same time is price gouging, right? Like, so, if you can't find Lysol, I think we looked online, you couldn't find Lysol, they were selling like a 4-pack for $70. Like
Exactly.
that's the same level of selfishness and uncare that is in the DNA of our country.
Mhm.
Profit over people, exploitation,
Mhm.
patriarchy, right? Like, and if we can't really sincerely look at that,
Mhm.
we're still a young country.
Yeah.
We take for granted that we have to be,
Yeah.
right? And I think that if we continue to, I was actually, I used to say to my colleagues, like, racism is not sustainable. There's all this conversation about sustainability. It's not sustainable, right? And we were and if you it initially began as an economic choice. We can make another choice, but if
Right.
you re-up on the same, which we seem to do, we re-up on the same kinds of behaviors, we're not going to learn. And so my hope is that what can we do? Yes, we need to have conversation, but we need to do a full 180,
Yeah.
not incremental change. You know, we need to do a full 180 on how we show up as human beings. I think we need to really, I don't think some people are fit to be called humans. They're not,
I agree.
because they act like animals.
Yeah.
And when I see a whole system that is designed around not caring for me and people who look like me,
Mhm.
that is not civilized.
Right.
That's
And
barbaric.
a system that protects those animals and hides them and in some cases elevates them.
To the highest levels of our society.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so until we're ready, yes, we need to have a conversation about that. But I feel like we talk too much.
Mhm.
We need to do. You know, we need to be different.
Mhm. Yeah. But, I there you do feel hopeful, but I think you would say, like you said before, you're always feeling hopeful. I mean, what do you have if you don't have hope? If we don't hope that something's gonna change after this, we might as well all give up. But we have to make it happen, and it takes individuals and individual, um, action and questioning and thoughts. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I've been hearing a lot of conversation about people of color seeking asylum in other countries.
oh my god.
This is an experiment, America,
Mhm.
right? And
Right.
right now, the experiment is going awry on
Yeah.
multiple fronts. And um, what we hold as democracy, those tenets are being challenged every day at
Mhm.
the highest levels of our government, but also in our communities. And we have to figure out, do we believe who we say we are? Do we believe that?
Do
And
you
if
believe
you
say that
say it
again?
again,
Yeah.
do we believe who we say we are as a country? Do we
Mhm.
actually believe that?
Yeah.
And
I
if
didn't
not, let's not espouse it. Let's just say who it is we are,
right. Let's not
and let's
yeah,
not pretend. Let's
and
not
be
pretend.
yeah. Eh, it's it's so heavy, and it's so necessary, and like, you said before, we have to we can't let go of this pain and this discomfort, um, but it's all sorta up in the air now, and it always has been, and so, this week just, you know, shone the spotlight on it again, and we are given an opportunity again to do something about it. Um,
And
so
that's the question. Will we?
right.
Will we
Will
do something about it, or will we quiet those voices? Will we change the story? I've been listening to the narrative.
Mhm,
Will we change the story? Will we dismiss it away?
mhm,
Uh, and we'll continue to come back here as a country until we deal with it.
right. I mean, I can say without, making this about me again, but I can tell you that I have probably for my entire life felt like, I was a good person. I did the right thing. I am not a racist. I don't behave that way. But I will absolutely say that this is the first time that I have been emotionally rocked by what I'm seeing, by what I'm feeling, and by how I saw myself kind of have a little bit of a knee jerk reaction to what I was seeing last week. And yeah, I hope that other people, other white people are feeling that too. We should have been feeling that a long time ago. So, but I'm I don't want to, I can't go backwards. I can just move forwards, and I know that for me, this has been something that is absolutely been eye opening, enlightening. Um, so I'll
I
do
think
my part, but
I just want to encourage white folks it's my belief that in the same way that anger and sadness can be instructive and developmental when you're going through a process, I
mhm,
think that guilt and shame is instructive and developmental.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, from the things that I've heard about Ahmaud Arbery or
Mm-hmm.
George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, they were nice people too.
Right.
You know, like they, and
Right.
I think that's the thing is like, they were nice people too, but people don't see that. What immediately happens is you dig up all the drudge
Right.
of their lives to disprove their niceness
Right.
and to reify the niceness of white folks, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying that you're not a nice person, and I'm not saying that there aren't millions of nice white folk. I've met some of them. Of course, there are nice white folk, but no one says, of course, there are nice Black folk,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I
Right.
think my encouragement would be to figure out, like I've heard people say, well, I care. Figure out your caring for what Black people.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean to care? How do you show up? How do you care for
Right.
your animals, your plants, your children? Is that the same level of care? You take action on their behalf,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
How does that show up for Black folk? What does Black care look like from a white person?
Right.
What does that mean that actually happens, and what actions can be taken from that standpoint? And I think that that's important. I do not, and I keep saying it over and over. Yes, this is about dialogue, but anybody who is in my space who just wants to talk to me
Mm-hmm.
and not do something,
Mm-hmm.
I have no need for that.
Right.
Only I have a need for it, but not that it's insufficient.
Well,
We
the, without
need
right.
action,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and
Yeah.
we need action from every crevice of our society, every single one. This is a
Right.
pertinent conversation. This is not just about police brutality. This is not just about the coronavirus. This is about the dehumanization of Black people and an anti-Blackness movement that has never, ever died, but has only grown in this country.
Right.
And that's what we have to change.
And it's shoved underground. People ignore it. People, yeah. Well, we didn't get any questions, which is fine, but I'll be curious to see if people were commenting on Facebook. Um, I, I appreciate so much that we've been able to talk, um, because, like I said before, you and I mean, we know each other sort of,
Yeah.
uh, in a different context, and so, this isn't easy. This was not easy for me. I'm going to tell you right now, um, and not, and I'm not saying that. I'm just being honest. I wanted to do this. I want to have this conversation, but I also want then to act. And I'll figure out my ways to act. Um,
Wonderful.
but I appreciate so much what you've done. What your work means. Um, and I just hope that, moving forward, you see uh, that you feel good and that you see change and that you can help with that.
I pray so. I pray so. And this wasn't easy for me either. It never is. Even though I do this work daily, it's not an
Right.
easy conversation because you're met with, all manner of resistance and ignorance. But it's necessary if I want to stay alive, right? Like this is what gives me life, is working in this space and trying to make change. And
Yeah.
I'm willing to work with, I don't care, blue people with gray stripes. It doesn't matter to me as
Yeah.
long as they're authentic in the work. So
Yeah. All
I
right.
thank you for having me. I appreciate you, Laurie.
Yeah. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
All
So,
righty.
all right. We'll talk again.
Absolutely. Take care.